At one stage in our life, we will have to think of our mortality. There's no running around that. There is no turning a blind eye or burying your face in this. You have to think of your mortality. There's no way around it. At one stage, you have to think of what you're going to leave behind. Or if somebody really cares, does the world need to hear your message? Does the world need to hear your joke? Or are you just keeping them as a stack somewhere so that if someone sometime finds them, it will tell them about you? Or are you just doing it as a creative satisfaction, as a form of narrative therapy where you want to tell your story even if nobody is hearing it? You just need to say it out loud so that you can put your memories in proper order, so that you can put a perspective to life, so that you can give life a logical meaning, so that you can define journeys. My journey started, well, I'd already been to 4 countries before I went to New Zealand. So I was born in India, I'd been to Thailand, I'd been to Dubai, and I'd passed Hong Kong. So technically New Zealand was my 5th country. But then if I think of my travels, and I don't know if I can put it in perspective, it's like writing a list of all the women that you've known in your life in small to big capacities, first base to 4th base or whatever the Americans call it, to think. I mean, you have to always think. So here I am thinking. I started from New Zealand, went to Australia, came back to New Zealand, went back to Australia, went to Melbourne, went to Adelaide, flew to Singapore, flew to Malaysia, took a train to Penang, then took a train to Krabi. Or rather, I got down at Surat Thani. I got down at Hatyai. And then came back to Kuala Lumpur, went to Philippines, came back to Kuala Lumpur, went to India somehow. God, I don't remember. I'll try and make sense of it at some juncture. But I did, after Thailand, I guess I went to India and then went to Dubai. And from Dubai I went to, at various times, went to Nepal and Iran and Oman and Egypt, coming back to Dubai. And then many times I went back and forth to India and went to Perth where I met Maggie. So I went to Perth 2-3 times. It was all a bit crazy actually. And eventually then I went to Sri Lanka from Dubai. And then from Dubai I flew into Ukraine, Kyiv. And from Ukraine I flew into London. And I was in Europe. And I do love Europe. And it's not because of the affluence or the money. It's just the whole cultural thing is just what they have done with this planet. The rest of us have not been able to create paradise on earth. And the Europeans have, which is, constantly being eroded by, but it stands. Then I went to London, then I went to Brighton. Oh my God, I went to so many places. I went to Berlin. I went overnight to Amsterdam, overnight to Paris. I had a bus pass and I would take buses in the night. Before I went to Berlin, I went to Brussels in the tube or underground train from London. Was it King's Cross? It was crazy. It was crazy. Loved Edinburgh. It was magical, and finally flew out of Berlin into New York City. From New York, I went to Seattle, took a bus to Vancouver. From Vancouver, I took a bus to San Francisco, to LA, and flew through Taiwan to Singapore. And I guess I came into Malaysia. So that was my first round. But I had gone back and forth to India and Perth many times.